I'd like to call the meeting of the Hayden City Council to order. It is Tuesday, September 28th, 2021. It is 5 p.m. and we are located in the Hayden City Hall Council chambers. Roll call vote, please, Abby.
Council President Satterfield?
Yes.
Councilmember Roeder?
Yes.
Councilmember Panabaker?
Yes.
And Councilmember DeLange?
Yes.
Excellent. Joy Richards, thank you for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Quickly, is there anybody waiting outside? Because we have room to sit. So I hope nobody's out there. Okay, great, thank you. Per the agenda, we'd like to begin. Corey Anderson has served faithfully on planning and zoning. And I'd like to read a certificate of appreciation to Corey Anderson, with deep appreciation from the City of Hayden for your many hours of volunteer service on the Planning and Zoning Commission from September 16th to August 2021, from September 2016 to August 2021. Your time, commitment, and contribution to our community is appreciated. Thank you for volunteering to serve and setting a good example for others in our community. Sincerely, Roger Satterfield, Council President, Jerry DeLange, Council Member, Richard Panabaker, Council Member, and Matt Roeder, Council Member, and Steve Griffiths, Mayor. So congratulations and thank you.
Can we do a picture?
Would you like a picture, Corey? You need to come back. Our picture
Sorry.
lady. Is
Sorry.
Yeah. Did you like,
Just
Sean?
right in front.
Okay. Is it?
You didn't know about that, did you?
No. It was not. I mean, that part. Neither was. I wasn't sure either.
Wait till you see what comes after pictures.
I didn't realize that she had gone that hard, and she went hard. Thanks. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you. Did we get the brief that whoever was breathing heavily?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item agenda 2, proclamation that I will read. City of Hayden, Idaho proclamation, whereas sudden, unexpected infant deaths, SUID, is the sudden and unexpected death of an infant birth to age 1 year, in which the manner and cause of death are not immediately obvious prior to the investigation. And whereas sudden infant death syndrome is a subset of sudden, unexpected infant deaths and remains the #1 cause of infant death between the ages of 28 days of life to 1 year. And whereas the tragedy of SUID can happen to any family regardless of race, ethnicity, or economic group. And whereas evidence-based research has proven that when babies are placed in a crib alone, in the parents' room on their backs on a firm crib mattress with the fitted crib sheet, using no crib bumper pads, pillows, blankets, quilts, or stuffed animals and toys in a smoke-free environment, they will sleep safest and reduce the risk of SIDS and prevent many other infant sleep-related deaths. And whereas Northwest Infant Survival and SIDS Alliance is a statewide, not-for-profit organization dedicated to providing infant safe sleep education, bereavement support services, and creating community awareness around preventing sleep-related infant deaths. And whereas during the month of October, Northwest Infant Survival and SIDS Alliance will hold special events including Run for the Angels on Sunday, October 3rd, distribute safe infant sleep educational pamphlets, cribs, and wearable blankets to families in need, therefore providing the best opportunity for all babies in Hayden to survive and thrive. And now, therefore, I, Stephen J. Griffiths, Mayor of the City of Hayden, hereby proclaim October 2021 as Safe Infant Sleep Awareness Month in Hayden, Idaho, in order to raise awareness about preventing sleep-related infant deaths and to encourage infant safe sleep practices so that no parent will have to endure the tragedy of the death of a baby. Witness thereof, 28th day of September 2021. That organization does a great job in support, not only in helping specifically, but in providing, as I read in the proclamation, support to those families that are affected. We're grateful for their volunteer service. Agenda item 3, consent calendar. 3A, approval and acceptance of property deeded as public road right-of-way. B, approval of Honeysuckle Glade First Edition Final Plat. C, approval of contract for government way tree pruning. D, approval to appoint Rhonda Mitchell to the Arts Commission. And from what I understand, that was Rhonda's request, correct? That's correct? Okay. Are you with the Arts Commission as well? Good. So you're okay. We're perfect. And 3E, bills for payment. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar as read? So moved. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember Roeder?
Yes.
Council President Satterfield?
Yes.
Councilmember DeLange?
Yes.
And Councilmember Panabaker?
Yes.
Thank you. Visitor comments, we just have one on a non-agenda item. Scott, is it for sale?
Yes, sir, it is.
Hi, Scott. If you could come up and Scott, I need to ask just for, you're going to give us your address. Is that Hayden?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. I thought it was, it just wasn't on here, so thank you.
It is. Thank you,
Time is
Mr.
yours.
Mayor and council members. My name is Scott Forsell, and I live at 1272 West Tamarindo here in Hayden. I've lived in Hayden for 31 years. I'd like to introduce you to my neighborhood. My neighborhood borders on the south at Honeysuckle, on the west at Ramsey, on the north is south of Hayden, and on the east on Reed. If you drive through my neighborhood, you're going to see an area that contains strictly single-family homes, many on larger lots and a couple of vacant parcels. Recently, a developer bought an acre that the acre is on Orchard.
Mr.
and is
Forsell, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is this going to concern a developer who's got an application pending that Planning and Zoning is going to hear on Monday?
It could, yes, ma'am, the first part of it is.
If so, I just would advise that you don't mention that. Council hasn't heard it yet. Planning and Zoning hasn't heard it yet. Land use matters are a quasi-judicial hearing, so they sit in a different capacity. They sit kind of in the capacity of judges. So I ask that you'd reserve your comment to Planning and Zoning, and then that comment could be part of the record, and then at which time council could review that.
Or you can simply say that where I live, we hope that we could, I mean, I don't mean to give words.
Yeah, it's just a delicate spot on comments about a potential land use application are really better reserved for that public hearing and not outside of that
I
context.
apologize, because it was not on the action or consent list tonight, I felt that it would be at least appropriate to.
You got here too early. I didn't mean that in a bad way. None of this is of your 5 minutes, so. But you did great. You just got here before
Okay,
we knew.
allow me to rephrase.
Good. You only used a minute, so nice job.
116 of my neighbors and I are opposed to the proposed mixed residential designation of my neighborhood. Most importantly, when I went around and talked to my neighbors, every single one of the 116 that answered their door agreed with me that our area, that our neighborhood should not become mixed residential. Think about that. Where in America can you get 100% agreement on anything? And did I ever get an earful from folks? The folks in my neighborhood want absolutely nothing to do with multifamily housing in a neighborhood that's been zoned single-family residential since Hayden began their zoning processes. Somehow, and we don't know how it happened, this half square mile was designated in the 2040 plan as mixed residential. I don't know how you folks were particularly involved in this plan, but we are curious as to how something that has historically been single-family residential could go to something that is mixed residential. The area is totally single-family residential homes, with one exception I'll mention in a moment. Even the larger lot owners that I spoke with don't want to have anything to do with this mixed residential designation. There is a problem in the neighborhood. There is a mobile home park on the south side along Honeysuckle. However, where is there ever perfect zoning? I suggest that we should deal with that single non-conforming use within the area without changing the entire half square mile to mixed residential. How'd this happen? City staff explained to me that this zone was designed as a fill-in for vacant land. Well, I used to live down Miles Avenue, down towards Strayhorn, and there are plenty of undeveloped tracts along Miles and also along Maple, but they continued their single-family residential designation in the 2040 plan. Why? To us, this just makes no sense. As I said, I don't know how much the mayor and the council were particularly involved in the zoning map, but you did sign the 2040 plan. That zoning map is deeply flawed, but fortunately, it has not been implemented. I've heard each of you in council meetings over the last several months say that you are trying to listen to citizens, and I believe that you're sincere in that. Please, listen to citizens now. Every single person I spoke with in our neighborhood is opposed to the mixed residential zoning designation. It was put on us with no input or consultation that we know about, while other areas of the city with exactly the same characteristics remain single-family residential. If we had been consulted, after talking and getting my ears bit back by my neighbors, believe me, I think you would have heard about it. Please, do not implement this zone and rightfully designate the area, as it always has been, single-family residential. You folks have any questions?
We can't. We can't. You get to make a comment, or it goes back and forth. But the good part is, so you did great.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And you were within time on the other side.
Okay.
But I can look to say it was never the intent, Donna. So can we look at that specific piece? Because we've tried to go back and forth to say, from a council standpoint, we want to be able to address those areas that don't make sense. And so we can look at that at some level. I think, can I say that? Since I already did.
I mean, I think we're always going to continue, to
That's
look
what I
at
mean,
zoning.
so-
There's items on the agenda that's clear.
that's
We're
why-
continuing to go through the
Okay.
process.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
One question, how do you spell your last name?
That's,
Orsell, it's F as in Frank, O-R-S-S-E-L-L.
and we've got it.
S-S-E-L-L.
L-L.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you very much.
Item number 5. Caitlin, are you going to start?
I can.
I don't know, Brett, Caitlin, whoever, I have lots of names.
Yes, if we finish 4, Donna can get ready.
Donna, you're gonna do 5
this,
and
but
6?
I asked Caitlin to kind of lay some ground on the legal side of things and where we're at and what we're doing.
5-2.
Before I go up there, I'm going to explain these books. Planning and Zoning Commission requested us to put together books that they could have in front of them. We're calling them the White Book, kind of, so that they could have books in front of them so that when issues came up that were of a land use action, they would have something that they could refer to. So in the front of the book, you'll find, in your books, you'll find kind of what a city council description does. The Planning and Zoning Commission has what the Planning and Zoning Commission does. Has a calendar in it, so that when you're trying to figure out when you can have that special meeting, you can actually have something to look at. Idaho statutes that Caitlin felt were important to have on hand and available kind of at your fingertips. The resolutions that were adopted that talked about public hearings and the processes by which we follow, that's in there. And then after that, we have put together flow charts. They're kind of been morphed. We had these like 15 years ago, and then they kind of fell by the wayside, but we've kind of brought them up to the existing standards and codes that we have in place today that list the various public hearing processes. And then on the back side of that same flow chart, here, I'll show you guys. We're not doing any public hearings tonight, but so this is like a flow chart that shows you the process from an application through approval, and then on the back side, it's a what to expect in a public hearing. So then when we have public hearings with planning and zoning and public meetings with city council, just so that folks understand that public hearings like for zone text amendments, for example, are public hearings with planning and zoning, but they're public meetings with city council. Those flow charts will be available at the counter when they sign in for all of the various hearing processes. And then when folks get to make their comments, they know which standards of approval they need to talk about in their responses back.
Thank you.
And also our website. The plan is to
Right.
put all those
Say
on the
they could
website. So
access
you
it.
can click and go to a process and see what that flow chart shows. And
Right, so that's this kind of stepping stone. So these will be available in your spots. We have made enough of them, so if you want to take them home and have a set at home and have a set here, we have those available as well. So just,
But thank you. And the concern was public access as well, so thank you.
yeah.
Okay. That answers that question that wasn't on the agenda.
Sorry about that.
So
Mr. Mayor,
with that, yes.
in regards to these, can this information be posted on our website?
That's what Brett just said.
Yeah.
So yes. In
Okay.
We're working on it.
fact, that
we're
was
working to
the,
get all of that there. So if somebody wants to look at a process for, I don't know, a land use change or a code change, they can go to that. It'll show the process. And then on the back, it'll have, location of where it is in the code and what to expect and things. So Donna and the staff did a really nice job putting those together.
Thank you.
It's
Great job,
meant to help the public go there and understand, because this stuff is complicated.
with respect to 5A, Caitlin, can you please set the stage?
Certainly. So.
Thank you.
And Donna has provided that information in her memo that she's drafted as well, but you'll recall last month, we provided options on what to do with the residential multifamily zone. Just as a reminder, the comprehensive plan and future land use map does not consider the residential multifamily zone itself. I mean, it has uses that are similar, but we kind of realized that the residential multifamily zone is an underutilized zone. Really, most multifamily was done by special use permit in the commercial zone. And so that zone itself isn't specifically called out in the comp plan or the future land use map. And then we subsequently to that did away with it in our text. When we added the two new zones, we added text to our code for mixed use, mixed residential, and then we deleted the residential multifamily zone. That still, though, leaves properties zoned residential multifamily. Nobody's zones have changed. We haven't rezoned property. So unless people want to come in on their own to do that, but we haven't initiated a zone change. So that kind of leaves.
Can you repeat that to make sure, because I think I get lots of letters.
Yeah, well, the city hasn't.
And the letters have indicated that the zoning has already been designated.
Right.
And it just gets tiresome after a while to say, when I respond that no zoning has changed, the
Right.
public response back to me is, yes, it has.
So two distinctions on a zone map and a future land use map. Our zone map is what property is zoned today, and the actual zoning applied to property. The future land use map is what the 2040 comprehensive plan designates the future zoning. Doesn't mean it has to occur that way, but that's what accompanies a comprehensive plan, is a future land use map. Where are we seeing, as the city, we're wanting to go with these zones? Where should they be located? But the actual underlying zones haven't changed.
So let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say that someone, based upon the comprehensive plan, someone read it and talked to 116 of their neighbors. Has that individual's zoning ever changed?
No, so the underlying zone hasn't changed, but there's a request probably to change a zoning and.
Or not?
Or not, but
Doesn't
that's
matter, but
the
that's-
individual, but their zones haven't changed, no. And
Okay.
so, but we always have said that there's still a process for that. If individuals want to come in through that, they will always have a process to seek a rezone. So that's just a distinction between the actual zone map amendment itself and the future land use map. But that left what do we do about residential multifamily? Because there are properties zoned that today, but there isn't code to support that zone, which then just creates more problem for staff because it just really creates a nonconformity. And sometimes those issues are easier than others, when it gets to setbacks and what they can and can't do with their property. And now we don't have a code to refer to.
So for clarification, was that zoning designation done prior to the comprehensive plan that was approved unanimously in November?
So the residential multifamily zone, yeah, that has existed. I mean, it was existing in the 2008 comp plan.
Which is interesting. So, and that's okay. I'm having a discussion with you, but it's still okay. So that existed prior to any work that was done on the new comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
And
yeah, zoned
yet
it.
public perception was that was added or a new part of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
So when individuals would come to me or write letters to me and say, we want our old zones back,
You still have them.
my response is, well, do you want it? And number two, no zoning has changed. So that's where we are as a city.
Yeah, properties zoned residential multifamily are still zoned that today. We're strictly talking about, well, what text do we have to support it? If somebody came in wanting to develop their piece of property, say it's vacant and it's in residential multifamily, but it doesn't meet setbacks, the discussion just becomes a bit more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's not as easy for people to know what to do with their property. And it's harder for staff because there isn't code. So it was kind of, well, what do we do about the zone if we don't initiate a process to change 500 and something properties? The one option was to do an interim ordinance, which is allowed under the Local Land Use Planning Act for up to 1 year. And that's what council has done with residential multifamily zone. So council has decided in the last few months, one, no city-initiated zoning of the properties. There won't, did not want to do a city-initiated process to initiate a zone change. And two, to enact an interim ordinance to reinstate the code for the old residential multifamily zone to give us a year to figure out what to do with these 500 properties, 530 something properties, yeah. So that's where we're at. So
Thank you for that. Any questions
Yeah,
before?
I'm still confused.
You shouldn't, then it's good that we ask questions because it's been
I
going.
want to just, and help me with this. So the 2019 land use map is what the city has for its map to determine what zone you're in, true or false?
the zoning map, yep.
So how is it we can have a residential multifamily that's in that map but doesn't exist?
Well, I'm saying it exists, it just, we did away with the text in our code, but we never went through another process to amend the zones.
Well, there's no text, then how can it exist?
Can I interject?
And that's
It's a timing item.
Well, why
So
would we get rid of a zone without replacing
It's
it?
a timing item. So we brought forward zone text amendments to add the two new identified zones into the zone text, anticipating that we would come on the heels of that with the zone map that would address those zone changes at the same time. And because of the fact that we wanted to remain transparent with the citizens of Hayden and not just do a city change to all of those zones, because we sent out letters, and those were, I'm not saying they were good letters or bad letters, but because they went out and we heard back from so many residents, we put a pause on the map. So it was a timing issue that left us without design standards for the residential multifamily zone. It was never intentional to be in that position.
So my question then, with the current folks that have properties in the residential multifamily zone that does not have a definition,
Correct.
how does that affect them? I mean, this is a question that I'm really concerned about, because this is part of the total confusion with the comp plan and implementing the direction we're going in. It's very difficult to wrap my head around something that says, well, we have a map, you're in this zone, but that zone doesn't exist.
Right, so we're putting code
I know, but
back in to
right
support
now-
that.
But it didn't exist for years and years and years. This was an effort to try to clarify,
Well, it did exist, it's in the current map.
but the directives associated with that, did
Is
not-
it?
that's- and that was a clarification.
The residential multifamily zone had code. When we did the code amendments to establish mixed residential, mixed use, as a full repeal and replace, I think, right, Donna, of Title 11, and some of 12 too, right? Most of Title 11.
Okay.
That was earlier this year.
April.
April, okay. So we had code.
So somebody currently that has property that's in the residential multifamily, and they want to sell their property, and they look at the zoning, but it doesn't have any definition. To me, that seems like that is a problem.
Yeah, so and I agree with you. So that was kind of we need to move here. We need to do
Why do we
something.
eliminate it without filling it in right away? Why is it that there's this undefined time or an undetermined amount of time that no one knows what they are? That just doesn't
Well,
seem
so
like
they're always zoned that. It was a matter of, we went through the comp plan process, and then the actions in the comprehensive plan, you need to update the code accordingly to support zones. And then, I guess, taking your argument in the opposite, you would have the opposite problem, right? What if you had zones and then no code? So if we didn't do code first to establish mixed-use, mixed residential, and we just initiated those zones, great, we've got a bunch of property zoned mixed-use residential, and then we're having this problem where we don't have code. So we established code first, and then, if you're going to do the initiated process, which we don't have to do, people can come in on their own. There is no requirement to do a city-initiated process.
Do we notify these folks that are in the residential multifamily zone that they have no definition with their zone? I mean, don't you think they'd want to know that?
Their zone hasn't changed, and we provided notice in accordance with the standards in the Local Land Use Planning Act for.
No, the question is, did we notify them that they're in a twilight zone?
No, I mean.
It's feeling like.
Yeah, and so I think that's the reason for the interim ordinance. We had to move, and that's kind of was the impression hopefully you all got from Donna and myself in August was, here's your options. We have to make a decision, because this is going to be difficult for staff to have 532, I believe, more nonconformities in this city. So we need to figure this out to have code. And so this ordinance establishes that for 1 year so that we have text. We have the same text we had before.
And that's all we're doing. But for clarity, and I don't mean to ask for Councilmember Roeder's question, but it didn't seem, Matt, is your question, if it's been on the books for so long, why isn't there clarity? Is that where your question is?
Did anybody from the city say, we need to have a town hall meeting and tell you folks that we're going to change this and we want your input on it? Because it seems to me that would be a good thing to do, to say, what do you folks want? Do you want to stay where you are in that zone? Or do you want to be part of the process of defining what the new zone is? And I think we need to do that, is to have a town hall meeting.
Well, I think we're going to.
So let's back up just a little bit.
okay.
In the last city council meeting where we got direction from city council to bring the interim ordinance forward, we had discussed the opportunity to meet with individual groups in the residential multifamily zones that were currently zoned residential multifamily and do just that. Ask them to participate in that conversation, and by putting the interim ordinance into place, that would afford us the time to be able to do that. So that was kind of discussed
Right, and out of that
previously in that council
500 and
meeting.
some folks that are in this zone, how many showed up?
We haven't had those yet.
Yeah, that hasn't happened because our time on our year isn't ticking yet, but we have to work on all those quirky areas and figure out how we're going to change the zone.
Is this not a quirky area?
Well, we're trying to figure out what to do with all the residential multifamily.
But just so for everybody and those that are on, and Donna, then we'll turn out, first of all, Caitlin, thanks for setting this up, is that, first of all, there's been no zone changes, and secondly, when people have moved into an area that's already zoned, we have gone out, and part of the issue that was done 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, is to set up the year so that every area that is non-conforming can be specifically addressed by those individuals that live in that area. And that was a huge step. I don't know any municipality that's done that. It's been far and away the right thing to do, is to be able to, A, identify with as many people as we can, those especially living in non-conforming areas, that they are zoned X, and do they want that zoning to change? Do they want that zoning to continue? And each separate entity associated with that will have the opportunity to provide input. Far different than a one-time town meeting, this will give each neighborhood, each area, the opportunity to be able to work directly with City Hall, to be able to identify, and I don't know that they're all going to be able to agree, hopefully they can, but this is the ultimate input. This isn't just, and I don't mean to say it tritely, just having a town hall meeting. This is to be able to look at each of the non-conforming areas that were identified and to provide the neighborhoods, the individuals that live there, with the opportunity to provide input. Having said that, Donna, do you want to now go?
I think that most of this is already covered, so we'll just try it. So on August 10th of 2021, staff presented to City Council possible options to enable City Council to give staff direction with respect to the citywide zone map amendment. And on August 24th, we gave the council 3 choices, whereby the council selected to create an ordinance that adopts the old code for up to 1 year in accordance with Idaho state statutes. So an interim solution is create an ordinance that adopts the old code as is for no longer than a year. So that allows for those additional workshops with planning and zoning and city council. It allows for some additional studies, and it allows for us to see if we're going to do zone text amendments or zone map amendments or a combination of both. So as we've talked and the mayor has talked about is reducing those incompatible zones, based on the size of the lots, based on the neighborhood context, based on split zoning, based on existing uses. So where are we today? What do those lots look like today? So if we were to take the residential multifamily, just as kind of looking at what we could be looking at with that interim, during that interim ordinance time period, the residential multifamily is that area kind of in brown here. And as you can tell, the single family dwellings and the setbacks are very consistent between the mixed residential and the residential R1 all the way through. Very similar, very similar. In fact, you'll note that if you look at the mixed residential code and the residential multifamily code, they're very similar in their context, which the interim ordinance will enable us to actually do those comparisons. Again, we did those in workshops as we kind of got ready for this when we did the zone code text amendments, but we'll be able to look at them more in depth over the course of the next year. So as we've talked about, Kayla was really good there. So there are 532 total lots that have a part of or all of their zoned residential multifamily. And of those, 405 of those lots are single-family residential. So the purpose of the residential multifamily zone, as it's written in the old code that we're adding back in, says, residential multifamily zone is established to provide higher density residential housing areas served by collector and arterial streets. This zone shall be characterized by buildings or groups of buildings containing multifamily dwelling units. So 80% of the lots that are currently in the residential multifamily zone don't meet the purpose of the residential multifamily zone. So those are part of the things when we're looking at zone text amendments. If we were going to leave this zone as it is, we may want to change the purpose or we may not. We just need to figure out where we're going to go. So they're not really in line with each other at the moment. So whenever we do zone text amendments, even with an interim ordinance, we have to look at the comprehensive plan. And the goals, policies, and actions are derived out of chapters of the comprehensive plan. And I always like to look at whole books, not just parts and pieces of them. So the Chapter 4 land use, Chapter 5 on housing, Chapter 6 living in natural environment, Chapter 7, transportation, and Chapter 11, community design, are kind of all addressed in the staff review. And these are goals, policies, and actions that could pertain to this zone text amendment. They were also part of the memo. And so the code text is exactly the same as it was prior to the adoption of the new zone text in April. The only difference is any references in the code text that are referencing the new code sections have been put in place of the old ones, because otherwise you'd be pointing into la la land. There are 4 standards of approval with zone text amendments. We didn't believe that there were, anyway, you can approve with conditions or approve them as they stand. You can, amendments to the zoning map and zone text shall be in accordance with the future land use map and the goals and policies found in the Hayden Comprehensive Plan. And amendments to the zoning map and zone text shall align with the zone district's purpose and intent. So the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval to the City Council of the proposed text amendments. And therefore, the City Council may decide to approve with modifications, or disapprove the proposed text amendments. We have if you should choose to adopt the ordinance to reinstate for the interim ordinance, the ordinance is attached to the back of the memo, and you can approve that at the same time.
Donna, usually I want to go quickly. Now, this is in English, and I don't mean that in a bad way because your English is excellent. What did Planning and Zoning recommend, and what are you asking that we approve or approve with modifications, not we, the council?
Planning and Zoning recognized that there was, I don't want to say disconnect, but there's a hiccup going on here between the zone text that was approved and the zone map that exists.
Correct.
They also recognize that the mixed residential and the residential multifamily are really, really close as far as how they work and how they operate, and they're both single-family residential, which is what 80% of the residential multifamily has built.
That exists today.
As it exists today.
Under the prior
old
comprehensive
code,
plan.
Correct. And so they recognize that their recommendation was that we kind of have a year to figure out a path forward. And so that's what the recommendation is for the interim ordinance, for a year to reinstate the old code.
Thank you. Well done. Questions by any member of council? No. Okay.
I do.
Please.
Just in going through this process, and if we adopt this ordinance, will we have to amend the 2040 comprehensive plan and the future land use map so it's all in sync?
So future land use maps are a vision of the future, and various zones, as long as they're in general conformance and guidance of the whole 2040 comprehensive plan, don't require a change to the comprehensive plan. So if you wanted to say that in your residential single family, say somebody, and I'm not suggesting this, so don't anybody lynch the person, okay? So say we wanted to do a zone text amendment to the residential single family zone to allow for duplexes by special use permit again. That wouldn't require us to go back and change the future land use map to allow for that higher density by special use permit in the residential zone, because it's primarily a residential zone. It still meets the intent of the 2040 comprehensive plan.
My analogy was simpler, and I didn't include duplexes. Future land use map is a future map that says we're going to take Mineral Ridge, we're going to start in the parking lot, and we're going to follow Mineral Ridge to the top of Mineral Ridge. So all this does is say there's a trunk in the middle of the path, or there's something else that's inhibiting the ability to be able to get to Mineral Ridge. Therefore, we're going to turn left or right, or we're going to take an old path. It's really that simple.
So mixed residential is a buffer in the future land use map. It talks about being a buffer between single family residential and other land uses like commercial or mixed use or what have you. So whether it's mixed residential or residential multifamily, it's still a buffer. So I don't see that it's a difference. Caitlin might have a different viewpoint.
No, one of the things we talked about, if you all recall, is talking about the support for that zone in the comprehensive plan and future land use map. And Donna's just spoke about that and is on point of, as long as there is support, the comprehensive plan future land use map, it's not like it has to spell out every single zone that you have. It doesn't. It has to talk about your land uses. And there is support for that in the comprehensive plans. Mixed residential and residential multifamily are very similar. Her slide with the chart shows that, right? All the numbers between the setbacks or the lot size or anything like that has a lot of similarity. So I don't think that in and of itself, requires a comprehensive plan or future land use, map amendment. I think in the next year, it'll just be figuring out, what do we want to look at with these properties? What should they be in the future? Because we've seen that. We've seen multiple areas of the city where people have really good suggestions for, a change to what it's shown at on the future land use map versus maybe what it should be. Because what's there, what exists today. So I think that's probably what we need to look for in the next year on working through some of those areas with the properties.
For deliberations, I probably should get the vote, and then I'd like to make a comment with respect to this, because this has been, though hard, and though there's lots of different sides, this has been a great example of service, feedback from citizens, and council or staff's opportunity to be able to learn from, address, and fix or identify. This is good stuff. This is the way it's supposed to be. So do we have then any more questions?
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to either approve with conditions, or not approve the Hayden City Code text amendment?
It'd be the ordinance, so you
Oh,
would,
shoot.
Interim ordinance.
Abby,
sorry.
it's not here. No. No. No, I got it.
You need the interim ordinance?
I do.
Okay.
No, I have it.
He needs his ordinance lingo. His packet.
So it would be, so do we need to approve and then do the ordinance? Is it a two-step
No, it would
process?
just, if there's if we're wanting to approve the ordinance, it's just under your normal standards of approving. the
You're okay,
ordinance.
we're okay with that?
It is, that's how it's going to go in effect, yep,
All right.
yep.
Sorry, Beck.
So the normal suspend the rule of reading,
I need a motion to read the ordinance by title only, but it has not been approved. It will be approved.
if we're going to approve it, yep, this is how.
Okay, that's why I want it from a jurisdiction standpoint. I want to make sure that we're moving in the right direction.
Yep, you are.
That's all we need
Yep, 'cause
from
it's-
that.
yep, 'cause it's gonna go in the
Though it was a
text.
public hearing recommendation,
Because it's code amendment,
but Donna's presentation identified the approval process.
right?
That's not specific to ordinance
So
approval.
if we're approving, and if you want to do a two-step on 5A, that's totally fine too. It's just if there's a motion to approve,
I'd like to,
passing, that's
because
fine.
the recommendation was different.
Yep.
I don't want to assume, I need to
Planning-
ask her if she'll date me before she marries me.
planning and zoning recommended approval of adding the residential multifamily text back into the city code via an interim ordinance.
That's what I'm looking
Yep.
for. Do we have a motion to approve the recommendations? Help me, Caitlin, wording?
Of planning and zoning to place the residential multifamily zone text back into the city code via an interim ordinance.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember Panabaker.
Yes.
Council President Satterfield.
Yes.
Councilmember Delane.
Yes.
Councilmember Roder.
Yes.
So then it would be the
No,
ordinance.
that,
Yep.
so now, I just like that process better. If
That's fine.
Are we okay?
On our way from dating to marriage, yep.
Thank you. Okay.
For the ordinance, to be
I
specific.
need a motion
or
to
now.
read the ordinance by
For the
title only.
ordinance.
To suspend the rule of reading in full on 3 separate dates and to approve the first reading.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please, Abby.
Council President Satterfield.
Yes.
Councilmember Panabaker.
Yes.
Councilmember Roder.
Yes.
And Councilmember Delane.
Yes.
An ordinance of the City of Hayden. That is the one on page 1 of 4 for 5A, correct, Donna?
Right,
Caitlin?
right, saying an ordinance of the city.
An ordinance of the City of Hayden, a political subdivision of the state of Idaho, amending sections 11-2 zoning districts, repealing conflicting ordinances, providing severability, providing for the publication of this ordinance by summary, and providing an effective date.
Correct.
Thank you. I need a motion that the ordinance be adopted on its having passed its first reading by title only, and then it be published by summary, incorporating the title as the core of the summary upon passage.
So moved.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember Roder.
Yes.
Councilmember Delane.
Yes.
Councilmember Panabaker.
Yes.
And Council President Satterfield.
Yes.
Thank you. Now the Reader's Digest version. Comprehensive plans, there was a lot of great work done, and it was passed unanimously, as was the future land use. But knowing at the time, it was done in November, it was unanimous. I don't know. Every council member's had a lot of things. There's been a lot of input back and forth. Your questions have made a ton of difference. Your concerns, your desire to get clarification. So thank you, those that are here and those that are not. This is the way it's supposed to be. And it's been I'm sorry if it's been more difficult for some of you and frustrating, I think on both ends, but this is how we figure out how to get things done. So thank you. How did I do? Did I cross the line, or is that okay?
I said, so Brett, now the real work begins on, we figure out now what
Which
to
is
do with
okay.
the zone. No, it's good. Yep,
5B, Donna?
Yep, there it is.
Mixed use design standards, and then a couple of other miscellaneous code sections. So we had workshops with Planning and Zoning Commission in June, and workshops with City Council in July and August. We had comments that were requested from local landowners, whether they were residential or non-residential. We heard comments from architects and developers, engineers, public agencies, realtors, and utility providers. So mixed use, from public outreach and the workshop, we created the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. And the future land use map, there's a lot of questions about what's that percentage of land and how does that really fit, and acres of land. And I just have to, I was kind of driving myself down the road, and everywhere that's yellow is single-family residential on the future land use map, and everywhere that's gray is light industrial, so we really kind of took that light industrial around the airport that was kind of requested. We still have some ag pieces out there. That's the land application site from the treatment plant that's predominantly out in that neck of the woods. Not all of it, but part of it. And this area over here is part of the shared tier. And if you haven't driven out there lately, you can pretty much see Rathdrum just hop, skip, and a jump over there, because they're getting really close out there.
They're just a jump now. The hop and skip were
Go on.
2 weeks ago,
Okay.
400 lots were approved. Yeah,
So they're really close out there. This is proposed to be the Hutter corridor. It's also proposed to be depressed, so in the ground below, ground level. So when you're driving across Hayden Avenue, you're going to be staying level like you do when you drive across the freeway on Government Way. As you're going south.
Has that been agreed upon yet?
Everything that we've kind of seen has been that it was going to be depressed in this area.
Thank you.
Pretty much, they're trying to scatter those airport areas pretty much, so down below. And so much of the mixed use that you see on the map is along the Hutter corridor for a variety of reasons. Partially not sure who you really want, and I've asked this before, what do you really want built up against the Hutter corridor? And what kind of buildings do you want there? That's part of that question. It might be commercial. There are a lot of commercial uses in the mixed use. Lots and lots of commercial uses. It could be totally commercial out there. This purple is kind of a placeholder because that's Hayden Canyon, and there is commercial in Hayden Canyon that'll be developed as part of their next phases. And then you've got mixed use kind of down the east side of Government Way. And I want you to drive yourself down Government Way and notice all of the businesses along Government Way. I've talked to a couple of folks over the past, and we've had the central business district in place for a really long time that allowed for that mixture of uses, that mix of commercial and residential along between Nita and Dakota, and one lot either side of Government Way. So I know there's a lot of concern out there about mixed use, but ultimately, from what we've seen in the central business district and redevelopment of developed lots, we're not seeing a lot of that develop into those mixed uses. So I'm not saying they won't, and I'm not saying they won't, but it's not all of the purple that's going to go into multifamily, which is what I keep hearing, and that's never, ever, ever been the sentence. Because mixed use is a combination of both commercial and multifamily, either both or one or the other. So I just want folks to really realize that when you're looking at the purple, it does not automatically equate to multifamily. Just what that slide says. So when we apply the mixed use design standards, we're applying the design standards to all new construction and renovations of the existing structures, except interior remodels of the same use, normal or routine maintenance and repair of buildings, or accessory structures, parking lots, pedestrian areas. Any type of construction that does not require a building permit. Temporary structures that are allowed per the zoning code or emergency structures. And wholly residential structures of 5 dwellings or less within 1 lot. So the design goals, we kind of had a goal in mind of what we wanted these kind of things to look like. We wanted the ground floor to promote a sense of interaction with the neighbors and the pedestrians. Street facing and front building facades create a clear and distinct breakup of mass. None of us wants to sit here and look at a 3-story building that all looks like, you know, where there are 2 or more buildings on the same project site, then the design will be to create a variation and reduce repetitive streetscapes. So we kind of want those buildings to kind of be shifted so that it's not looking like a sea of, you know, like row houses, but, you know. And cohesive architectural elements, so we want the whole thing to kind of work together so that the architecture works. What we don't want to be is so restrictive that nobody can get creative, because there's some really cool stuff out there. We want to create safe, friendly, and more intimate spaces. We want landscaping and lighting to work together. We want the compatible building and site design for the neighborhood that it's in, and mixed use along Government Way might look entirely different than mixed use along Hutter or Lancaster, or up in Hayden Canyon. Direct and convenient access to schools, parks, and services. And we want formal and informal community gathering places and connections to neighborhood and employment areas. So the design requirements all have to meet current code for landscaping, landscape buffers, for lighting, for off-street parking and loading, the site requirements that are in Title 11, the sign requirements that are in Title 11, all of those still have to meet those requirements. And then I tried to get the MU1 and the MU2s to work. And I pulled all of them based on the kind of the sizes that we were looking at, and then based on the arterials. And pretty soon I had all of them selected. So the goal was never to have all of them be mixed buildings, require a commercial and a multifamily component. So we tried, as staff and planning and zoning saw it as well, we tried to get into locations where a mixture of uses would have a good opportunity of getting out of their site, and that they would work with the transportation corridors that we had. So properties within 300 feet of an existing signalized intersection or a future intersection which is identified as a controlled intersection, i.e. interchange, signalized, or roundabout, in the CIP of the transportation plan, a minimum of 10% of the project's ground floor area must be developed and maintained as commercial use. So for structures with both residential and commercial uses, the required commercial must be within the ground floor and may not be replaced by commercial in another location. So if, say they figured they needed 10% of the ground floor is 600 feet, but they wanted to just put that on the second floor, they couldn't just arbitrarily put it up there because it didn't really meet the intent. But we recognize that not every case is the same. So we added language that would allow for that to go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission at a regularly scheduled public meeting, and they would get to make the determination if it made that design goal intent. And for those structures where the primary use is commercial, the structure could have less than 4 apartments within the mixed use structure. That was added back in the design standards because we recognized that in the central business district especially, we allowed for that ability, and so we were like, okay, we can't just yank it out of there. So that's why that's there. For structures located where the site has less than 50 feet of street frontage or the residential component of the site is set back 150 feet or more from the frontage road, no ground floor commercial use shall be required. Parking and associated residential accessory uses for the residential component of the site must also be set back that 150 feet. So that's pretty much like what you have over here in the Country Ridge Apartments. That whole structure is set back that 150 feet, and it has all of its required parking, and its clubhouse are all back there as well. So at the workshops, we talked about maximum heights. And so if your property line, if you are abutting a property line that is that mixed residential or single family residential, any of that residential that exists, there's a 20-foot minimum setback, and then you can have a second-story building. Second stories are allowed in every residence everywhere in the city. All residential has a second, can build up to 2 stories. So I can't make this more restrictive than what's already allowed next door. But we recognize that we really wanted that 3rd story setback. So effectively, that 3rd story can't be in the hatched area, so it sets back 45 feet. It's a 45-degree angle. If you have property that has street frontage or abuts another zone, then it can be 3 stories tall. So again, we left that minimum personal space area where no garage is provided, recognizing that folks have stuff they'd like to put out in a locked storage personal area when they don't have a garage to put it in. All roof-mounted equipment shall not be visible except solar equipment. And then that property owners association, so every mixed-use property will have a property owners association with CC&Rs and common area maintenance agreements. And 2 things that fit really strongly is the parking space assignment, so we're not guessing who gets to park where. And then the responsibility, obligations, and maintenance within that site. So common open space could be a variety of things, but basically it's where your residents can go as a group or individually into a common area. This could be playgrounds, clubhouses, recreation rooms, pools, spas, community gardens, picnic areas, gazebos, landscaped areas with paths, water features, sports courts, dog parks, natural open space. I mean, literally a lot can be proposed that way. One of the questions that came up in planning and zoning is if somebody put a small gazebo in and it sat for 2 people, would that be considered a gazebo for common open space? And the answer was no. The answer is you have to make it big enough to serve the people that you are serving in your establishment or in your project site. Private open space is fenced yards, patios, decks, balconies, etc. So then the design requirements, we talked about a couple of scenarios. We're going to start with up to no more than 12 dwelling units per acre. So if this is an example of a 5-acre site and you put some private space in there, you could have 12 units or no more than 60 dwelling units in your project site. And if you added a playground, you could get a little bit denser. And if you added a playground and a gazebo, you could add more and more. And if you had a playground, gazebo, and a clubhouse, or any of those kinds of common open space, you could get to no more than 15. So in all cases, all other design standards shall be required. In some cases, traffic studies and sewer studies may be required based on the proposed number of units. And for those properties within the mixed-use zone and also within the central business district or the neighborhood commercial node, all of those requirements have to be met as well. So it's not, I'm going to do this and not that. No, you get to do all of it. So then we talked about those secondary uses. I give the example of the Country Ridge Apartments back here. So if you had a patio, deck, and balcony, now you still get 12. But if you put that type 1 landscape buffer in, you can get up to 14 dwelling units per acre. That recognizes the fact that a type 1 landscape buffer is pretty much a fence and then trees that are about every 20 feet, and they all grow together and create a hedgerow around the whole structure. And then if you wanted to combine A and B together, this was for a 4-acre site. It's a multifamily. It's located 175 feet from the road frontage. You started off with your 12. If you added your landscape, your type 1 landscape buffer, you got to 14, and you added a playground, you got to 15. If you added a gazebo and a sport court, you're still at 15. So 15 is 15. So we do architectural design review concurrent with site plan review and building plan review in the central business district, and neighborhood commercial nodes if they were to come in. The same thing would happen here in the mixed use, as we would do that mixed use design standard, making sure that they meet those requirements as outlined in this code section at the same time as their building permit and site plan review. So they'd be all done at the same time. And the written decision will become part of the permit, so they'd know what they have to continue to maintain. Any appeals to staff's interpretation of the design standards come directly to City Council. So that's the end of the mixed use, except for that if we make those changes to the mixed use, we also recognize that in the central business district areas that are overlaying the commercial zone, because commercial no longer allows residential uses, that it effectively didn't have a density maximum in the central business district. So we wanted to straighten that out and include that with the same density allotment that's allowed in the mixed use. So they both would have a maximum of 15. So that's the highest you can get in any zone anywhere in the city.
Would you repeat the central business district? Because it's amazing how, as we did our homework, and there's a lot of it, and then you find exceptions. There was no restriction in the central business district.
There wasn't.
In any previous direction given by previous councils or this one.
Correct.
Which is an interesting point. So
that is correct. So the accessory dwelling unit language allows for accessory dwelling units to be placed in the rear yards of properties that can make them fit on their property, still meeting lot coverage requirements and setback requirements. And there are a few of those around the city. But it became obvious that there are emergency services. Our setbacks for our primary structures are 10 feet from side yards. And when you have a 10-foot from your side yard and a 2-foot overhang of your eave, you really have an 8-foot wide swath. And the emergency services can't get fire trucks in an 8-foot wide swath. So they requested, Northern Lakes Fire requested that we add language to our ADU standards that required that they have a minimum of 12 feet wide and 13.5 feet tall. Again, those eaves are kind of a pain, so that they can get those emergency services back to those ADUs. And that if they're sitting back farther than 150 feet, then the fire department requested a turnaround. So it's just trying to work with jurisdictions to keep our folks safe.
and these are wider than any previous code direction.
Correct. That's correct.
That we had.
And the other thing is that the fire department reviews all of our commercial non-residential building permits. They do not review our residential building permits. So this is kind of trying to catch that where it's two ships are passing a little bit. So this was a Scrivener's error somewhere in the code that was adopted. Two cells were merged together. And so since April-ish, we haven't had a noise ordinance on the weekends, which I kind of sort of think maybe we want to add back in again. And these changes will also update our code that's been codified. They lost one of we don't have a height requirement in the codified section, but it is in the ordinance that was passed previously. So all of our zone districts do have maximum heights, just not in the code that's been codified. So they'll update that as well. So the comprehensive plan analysis, the mixed use zone designation, includes both commercial and residential, so it effectively covers up most of the comprehensive plan. Chapter 4 Land Use, Chapter 5 Housing, Chapter 6 Living in Natural Environment, Chapter 7 Transportation, Chapter 8 Economic Development, and Chapter 11 Community Design. As you can tell, lots of goals and policies and actions are applied, and they were in your memo. The same standards of approval as previously. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval to the City Council of the proposed text amendments. Again, you can do this the same way as you did the last one, with approval of the proposed code text amendments, and the ordinance is attached as well. Do you have questions for me?
Questions for Donna?
No.
I do. It's just to let you know, these are more restrictive than any municipality. And I've had a lot of letters, and I print them and read them, and sometimes you try to respond and fact gets in the way. But it was interesting that one individual said developers are flocking to Hayden with respect to multifamily. And I had just gotten another letter how restrictive Hayden is to the developers and how they continue to go to can I say another city? Rathdrum or Coeur d'Alene. So it's an interesting reverse bell curve with respect to this. So thank you for taking the time. Any other questions or comments, please, Jerry?
Donna, so would one of our choices be to do something similar to the interim ordinance if we wanted to take, say, the mixed use?
It would be less with the interest is, Donna, your answer, but it's just been rattling around forever. Great question, but it would be less restrictive to go with the earlier, if I understand, I mean, it's not just black and white. So Don, I'll let you answer that
So
question.
we can always do a follow-up zone text amendment to the mixed-use design standards in the future if you adopt these. Or we can do an interim ordinance that would put these design standards in place for a year, and then we'd have to evaluate if we wanted to adopt them in a year or not.
Not unlike what we did previously, but it would.
But the ordinance would be different.
And the ordinance would be different, so we wouldn't obviously read that. But the other side is it would be this is more restrictive, it would be less restrictive. And one of the feedback from one of the developers, from two of the developers, were we want to go backwards because the new stuff is driving us. I mean, it's just an interesting time. So, but yes, we can. Yes, you can. Council has the ability to do exactly what we did previously and to, what did we call it for a year?
An interim ordinance.
An interim ordinance.
Right, so you could have all of you need another ordinance to change an ordinance though, so we needed to do that. But you could have an interim ordinance where you put the text, the adopted text of those zones into an interim ordinance. Tonight sorry, I'm on mute, just I think that's what Lynn was trying to tell me. Okay, there we go, sorry. So tonight, the options are, just with this one, the text as it exists today is, I think, very minimal design standards and up to 20 units an acre. And so then after hearing public comment and hearing concerns from all of you, staff went back and revised the code to put more design standards in and scale back the units per acre. And so that's what this does. And that's what the mayor's referring to by it's more restrictive, because it does require quite a few more design standards and it does reduce the units per acre. But you certainly could place, as you work on that with code, we have code adopted, so it would take, again, another ordinance to impact that, like the code amendments here, if you wanted to, an interim ordinance, and have those design standards in effect for only a year, but then that's the impact, just so you know that then they're only in effect for a year, so then we would need to look back and say, whether or not we want these long-term. don't know if that helps to answer your question, Councilmember. Okay.
Donna, what I'm thinking is that when I look at the future land use map, there's quite a bit of purple, the mixed use, and I think the other designations are fine, but I just think in talking with citizens and in the past, Hayden has been, it's been able to keep a lot of its small town feel. And when I look at all the mixed use on this, I think that we'd lose a lot of that. And so I'm thinking that maybe we should, like with the other interim, take a look at the mixed use areas and lessen some of those areas so that we have moderate density or moderate growth and density.
We can always, continue to can we do that? If that's the question for me, I'm certainly not a planner, so I don't want to opine on what planning should look like, for the city on how we want zones to look like. That's certainly for your community development director and all of you too. Can we look at revising or always working on the comprehensive plan and future land use map? Yes, you absolutely have the ability to do that. With that, I would say that's not always that simple because there is notice requirements, public comment requirements. So it's not something tonight we can just change. But also aligned with that, you also updated a lot of your, your infrastructure plans, your sewer, parks, and transportation with numbers. Those are all based on a certain, set of numbers for the city on. Population and growth and things like that. So any changes could impact those, I guess, is all I'm saying. And that's not necessarily like, the city may want to go that route. Just know that it may not be just a comprehensive plan amendment. It may require we change. All of our capital improvement plans are based on those plans we just updated too. So
Caitlin, just like a zone map amendment, if a person in the public wanted to do a comprehensive plan amendment, do they have to own the land that the comprehensive plan is over for the area that they want to do it? Or could they come in and do a future land use map amendment, anybody in the public? Could they request that?
Interesting. I haven't seen where people who don't own the property seek to do a future comprehensive plan amendment on that.
But it's not their call anyway.
Well, there is a provision in the Local Land Use Planning Act, and I don't have that off the top of my head but just on kind of discussing the comprehensive plan and larger future land use map amendments. So I don't know that off the top of my head. I struggle to see with, if you're not the, kind of a real party and interest on the owner of the property. But the other side is possibly because it's not the current zoning the property is today. You'd certainly have to be the owner I don't get to go request to rezone Brett's property. I don't own Brett's property, so I can't request it to be rezoned.
But why would if I bought property, I'd go through the other channels, not a future land use map?
I think she's requested, in terms of if a rezone, so some requests to rezone property are just simply, I want to rezone it. If the comprehensive plan doesn't support it, they will need to do a comprehensive plan amendment. Yeah, I think that's what Donna's referring to, right? Okay.
So my sentence is that the mixed use design standards that are proposed here that we've workshopped with everyone would only not apply to all of this purple today. It would apply only to those properties who come in and request a mixed use zone. Then they would have to develop in accordance with those design standards. So as the council has directed, they're coming forward in a case-by-case basis to be heard individually, and that's the only place that the mixed-use design standards would apply is in those zones that are zoned to that. And currently that map that's in the corner behind Scott Forsell is the citywide zone map.
Scott, if you'd like to do a Vanna White, yeah, thank you. That
The citywide zone map that exists today.
Thank
So there is no areas up there that are zoned mixed use today.
correct. So, Donna, in answer to your question, Councilmember Delane, is that yes, there can be whatever motion you want to have. And that that's the answer. If you want to make a motion with respect to however way you would like to have it done, it would be just like any other motion. But this is consistent with the request that I think you made earlier about 12, moving back to 12. That was the impetus for much of this work.
May I just?
That please, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer, there was a couple cleanup things from the fire department and a couple other things that were Scrivener's, but really what was driving this was, again, listening to folks that they were concerned with the number 20 that's currently approved in the code, that's too high. And so I think as you went through and looked at that, you said, okay, we want to go back. It was at 12. And what this is proposing is the 12 is the baseline, up to 15 if they do those certain things. And so, again, the bigger picture on this is currently folks in those areas could come in and request the higher amount, the 20. We're looking at reducing it back down to what it was, or pretty close to what it was. And again, coming from people that were concerned and brought that concern up. And so that was the direction we were given to go.
So Donna, I'm confused with the purple areas on the future land use map. It's zoned for mixed use, but are you saying that if anyone wants to develop it as mixed use, they have to come in and apply for a separate?
So
It's zoned.
it's zoned.
Scott,
Yeah.
that's what it's zoned for. We haven't made any changes
So Scott,
to zoning.
And Donna, just because
you.
there's a lot of purple on that map, and
Yeah.
we're not talking the same purple.
No, it's not
If
the same
anyone
purple.
else
That's
is,
light purple.
just understanding that. That's not mixed use. There's no
no,
property.
that's just
zoned.
showing the areas that are not in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. No property is zoned today mixed use. There exists no piece of property anywhere in the city that is zoned mixed use. The future land use map identifies areas in the future that could be zoned mixed use, and they could have a commercial or multifamily development on that mixed use piece of property. So just as an example, we had a pre-development meeting with folks that there's like one vacant lot just north of Lauren Estates on Hayden Avenue. And he came in for a pre-development meeting, and I said, well, this is a great use. It's a commercial use. Your neighbors are all commercial. The property shows as mixed use in the future. Do you want to be mixed use, or do you want to, your use would work in both mixed use or commercial? What are your thoughts? He says, heck, I'll just stay commercial. I like commercial, and I have a commercial use, which is why I keep saying that there are a good sizable number of properties that are currently either existing commercial and would have to redevelop to get that mixture of multifamily in there, or there's just some. It's a could be both conversation, not necessarily will change to mixed use. So
Okay.
I don't know if that clarifies or not. So like property, if you look out there, back by Scott, there's yellow on Hutter. So all of that is currently zoned to residential single family here. It's all R1 in here. That's what it is today, is R1. The only way that they could get to mixed use and mixed residential is to come in for a zone map amendment and request a zone map amendment to mixed use, mixed residential, or combination thereof.
Have you had any real calls for that kind of a thing? I haven't heard of much, but I know there are instances where people want to do it. Do you see much of that action?
You will have zone map amendments coming before council.
And likewise, to my example, when I said that you would need not every rezone is just an automatic request to rezone. Some have an accompanying comprehensive plan amendment. An example would be the orange on the inside, in the middle of the yellow and the purple. Somebody who is currently zoned single-family residential today,
In
but
here?
yeah, but wants to be mixed use, purple, but their property is shown to be orange. They need a comprehensive plan amendment to change the area on the future land use map to purple. And second to that, they need a request to rezone their property from single-family residential to mixed use, if that example makes sense. So.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, so in some instances, you have two sets of camps on a request to rezone property. Let's say that we'll go yellow to orange on the map here. Donna will point for us. So is currently zoned single-family residential, and the future land use map designates my area to be mixed residential. I'm going to come in for a request to rezone property to mixed residential. That's just a request to rezone property because the future land use map designates what I'm wanting to be. Let's jump from, say I'm supposed to be orange, but I want to be purple. So I'm currently zoned single-family residential. Future land use map designates me to be mixed residential, which is orange.
Oh, okay, gotta go find one. Sorry.
I thought I was using the same, orange to purple. So I'm currently zoned single-family residential. I want to be mixed use, which is purple, but the future land use map only designates me as mixed residential, which is orange. So I want to be purple. The future land use map says I have to be orange. The only way I get to be purple is I request a comprehensive plan amendment to be able to have the property be purple. And second to that, because that doesn't actually change the zoning on the property, I have to request my property be rezoned, to mixed use, the purple. So, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I still have another question for Donna.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Donna, in the purple zones that are mixed use, can someone just build mixed use, or do they have to request an amendment?
So there are no properties zoned to mixed use, so the only way they could get to mixed use is to request a zone map amendment. If a zone map amendment were granted, recommended by planning and zoning and approved by city council, then an ordinance would put that zone map amendment forward, and then they could come in with a project meeting whatever design standards we have in place at the time.
At the time their application.
At the time of their application for their site improvement
Plan, right.
project site.
Right.
Purple doesn't exist as a zone in
Today.
Hayden.
Nobody.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, nobody is
So-
zoned.
But if we approve this, does it?
No.
No, this doesn't rezone any property. This is just design standards. This is just the text.
This is making it harder if in fact somebody wants to get zone changes later, that we've identified that if you do it, you've got to climb to this level. You've got to have greater spacing than what exists previously. I don't mean to take away your thing, Donna.
You're great.
So there's nothing, the city of Hayden does not have a zone for mixed use. It doesn't exist.
No
standards-
property is zoned that. It's more
That's
accurate to
better,
say.
thank you.
We have a zone.
Even though I
we
said,
have the
it's
zone.
okay,
It's-
one's English, but the design requirements associated with this agenda item are to make, if in fact someone goes through the entire process and gets approved, that there are certain design requirements associated with that don't exist presently.
Correct.
And so this agenda item is to restrict even further the design requirements associated with someone that wants to go through the process to be able, if in fact is ever approved, that if in fact there's approval, that there's design implications associated with this. And in many times, these design requirements, help me, Donna, because I'm kind of getting out there, as long as the individual understands the design requirements and that they are restrictive, it allows for an earlier decision to be made associated with the uses of that property. Amen, hallelujah.
This is just like, you know how our single-family residential zone has a minimum lot size of 8250? This is like that. That is a minimum floor requirement. Don't get to go below it because that will be non-conforming. This is that floor. This is the bare minimum of what you have to do in the mixed use zone.
Does that answer?
It does, because this is such a difficult concept to understand. I think I understand it now. I would suggest that tonight we table it to give council more time to study this and more time for our citizens too, I mean, I just want this to be clear to everyone, and I don't think it necessarily is very clear right now.
You may make a motion, or others, it's the same process. So if that's what you'd like to do we have any other comments or questions by any other member of council?
I would
Please.
like to also see that we have more time to deal with this. I would like to make an amendment, though, that the next time that this comes before the council as an action item, it's not a public meeting, but a public hearing. I want to hear from the public. The more we hear from the public, the better we get the response from them. I'm concerned that we're making decisions that the public they're not well enough aware of, and they need to be aware of these changes. Having their input is critical. And so that I would support a motion, Jerry, that would be that we table it, but the next time it comes before us to discuss it, that it would be a public hearing.
Councilmember Roeder, if you'd like to make that motion, I'll second it.
The only thing I'd comment is the reason it isn't is in our code. I think that was amended a few years ago now on the process for just the public hearing items in general as they flow through. We used to do two. We used to do one at planning and zoning and then another hearing at council. We have since done one at planning and zoning and then just a public meeting item at council for your review.
But this is design requirements. This isn't zoning.
It's a text amendment.
This is design requirements. This has nothing, this makes it more restrictive, so others will come in to say, oh, we already have to meet it.
Yeah.
So this has nothing to do with zoning.
No, you're right.
That's what I mean, this is, I don't know how we've gotten there from a council standpoint. This has nothing to do with the zoning associated with any mixed use. This is only identifying, I mean, this is, Donna, help, because again.
I'm just trying to think.
These are additional text amendment requirements associated with anybody that ever does anything in a zone that still hasn't been approved. I'll use my other analogy. My dad wanted me to marry somebody from Texas. I lived in California, I lived in Idaho. I didn't know anybody from Texas. He had played in a golf tournament in Texas. And from the time I was little, said, Steve-O, you need to marry somebody in Texas. So all this is saying is that Steve-O, if he ever gets married, has to find somebody from Texas. But his father says if you get married, you got to marry somebody from Texas. Thank heavens I did. So this has nothing to do with public hearings associated with zoning. This is simply identifying legal requirements associated with the restrictions or additional restrictions that are needed on these properties, because if we go back, then there's no restrictions. It's it is back to where it was before.
Yeah, these are just development standards that when people come in either at pre-development, well, they're going to come in for a pre-development meeting at some point with the city. So they meet with staff and they have ideas on what they want to develop. And then staff says, all right, well, here's your code. Here's our code. And you have to meet these requirements. And it may drastically reshape the project they want to do. I mean, you just may not be able to accomplish all the things that they would want. You know, Donna and Alan and Rob, that's every week for them. They hear this. They hear what people want to do. And well, okay, here's our standards that you have to meet these. These are the floor. That's the minimum. So you have to at least meet these things, you know, in addition to state code and other restrictions. So this is just one more thing, right, that these are just design standards that will have to be met. It's no longer a free-for-all at 20 units an acre. It is, well, you'll guaranteed get 12, and if you do a lot more, you could get 15, if you can meet setbacks and all those other items.
And I'd like to add that even though that you could get 12, just the physical shape of the lot and the setbacks, you may not get it.
Yeah.
And it might not be approved anyway through other processes, but you may do whatever motion you want to do.
Just to
That's
answer
fine. It's-
council
but
members.
This isn't a zoning
Right.
discussion.
Mr. Mayor, if I can,
Please.
you know, I agree with everything you've said, Mayor. It is a design standard. And I think we're making way too much out of this and going way beyond what it actually is intended for. And to me, you know, and maybe I'm not getting it, but I think I am. To me, it's a design standard that makes it tougher than what we have.
Now that's
So,
true.
If we changed we're not going to again, so don't lynch the person who said it, like Donna said earlier. If we changed the minimum lot size in single-family residential from 8,250 to 8,000, that's a design standard. Or what if we increased it to 10,000 square feet? That's a design standard.
But it's
I
not
now
a
have to
zoning,
have.
and that's where I want.
No, and neither
Council-
is that, but
This
that's
is-
a
yeah.
design, that's just a design standard of the zone.
This is not identifying that mixed use is a zone.
Donna?
I just wanted to comment to Councilmember Roeder. So the Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing for this zone code. It was noticed everywhere that we notice all of the various news outlets that we send notices to. It was put in the Coeur d'Alene Press. It was noticed. It was sent out to all of the agencies. Every comment that we didn't receive isn't in your packet because we didn't have people comment. So it's not that it wasn't noticed, because it was noticed and it was a public hearing. And we did have people present at the public hearing that were present at Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting where there was a public hearing, and they did not give comment for this zone text amendment, just as a matter of context.
I'd like to, there's a bigger issue that's hovering over this, and what the issue is, and what I'm going to say is that there's a disconnect of where the city is going with the comprehensive plan and what the people of Hayden want. And I want to read a letter that I think gives a great statement about the feeling of citizens. And it's from a family that, it's a fifth-generation family in Hayden. And the family has contributed a lot to this community and to the county and in many ways to the economy in Idaho. And so it's a very short letter. I'm just going to read it. It says, "The city of Hayden is reaching a tipping point. Growth is going too far, too fast with the implementation of smart growth theory of land development in the 2040 comprehensive plan. One major component of this theory is the direct growth in mixed-use zoning, high-density housing with or without commercial structures. Allowing a mixed-use zone will forever change the character of the city of Hayden from a small town and mostly 4 single-family residents per acre to as many as 15 residents per acre. This dramatic increase in density will increase traffic congestion, especially considering that the Hutter bypass is decades away and becoming a reality. Considerable infrastructure deficiencies already exist, and this zone exacerbates them. This zone should also be halted for further study, if not altogether eliminated in the future land use map. Reverting to the 2019 zone map would allow time to study the effect of this zone. Smart growth is too ambitious, too contrary, and too ill-suited for the city of Hayden. Why must we change who we are to please a theory that doesn't work well for our community? It's time to revisit the 2040 comprehensive plan. Thank you, regards, Joy Richards, who is our author, and she's in her room. And I agree with this, that we are in a disconnect with our people, and we need to revisit the comprehensive plan.
Which can be done, just separate from a consideration. We can certainly do that of whether or not you're wanting to adopt these code changes with respect to design standards to mixed use. I've said that just earlier tonight. We can look at it all again. There is an impact to that, and I'm not saying it's necessarily negative on just our master planning and those plans and our improvement plans. And if council wishes to undertake that, we can do that.
This does not address mixed-use zoning as a consideration. This is simply an amendment describing and describing the restrictions. The restrictions is not the right word, but that limits the conditions associated. And I don't disagree with many of the letters received with respect to being able to understand, is mixed use something that Hayden wants? Totally different question and a totally different time to look at it. So we can have any amendment, any motion that you wish, but the agenda item has to do solely with identifying the limits and conditions that would be associated with any type of construction that gets approved through any zoning changes that have not yet nor might not ever be approved. So that's as good as we've got. So we need to at least address this, and we can address it in any way, shape, or form. Any member of council, if you'd like to make any motion associated with tabling, associated with approving the restrictions, this is the time to do so.
Donna, a point of clarification again.
Okay.
So if we do not approve this change tonight, then can a developer, I mean, there's no restrictions then on how many units they can build? Or
They would have to have a zone map amendment to mixed use, and then whenever their project came forward, they would have to meet the requirements that were in place at the time that the project came forward, applied for the application of the project.
I'd like to make a motion to table this for tonight for further study by council and have it brought up at our next meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Council President Satterfield,
No.
Councilmember Panabaker,
No.
and Mayor Griffith. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Roeder
Yes.
and Councilmember DeLang.
Yes.
Mayor Griffith,
Just to table it for 2
till
weeks?
the next meeting.
Okay. Is that that was the motion as I understand it?
Yes.
Yes,
And have it at the next meeting.
correct.
Yes.
Did she say that?
Yeah, Councilmember Dilling's motion is to table this, this item and have it at the next meeting. That's what I have. Is that okay? Okay.
Correct. That's why I needed clarification.
Yeah, that's what I have.
6A, thank you, Donna. Action item, East Lancaster Water Storage. Bob? Is Bob here? There you are. Donna, do you have this one too? Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of help. I'm the speaker of the staff and others, so.
And to set the standard, there are 3 separate actions
Correct.
associated with this presentation. Donna's, hopefully you've read your packets and understand the different, this is a memorandum of understanding. This is not any, I just want to set the ground rules so we're not approving something. This is a memorandum of understanding, and there are certain conditions associated in that memo that we do need to approve, but to that level. We're not changing the world again.
We're going to try not to.
Thank you.
So, when the Marks Ranch folks came in to ask for a request for annexation, we heard back from Lakes Highway District as part of our agency notices that said, you know, you're going to be kind of on both sides of Lancaster, you know, here and here, and would you like to take the rest of the right-of-way, and then can you also include our little area between the multimodal path and Lancaster, just annex all that in at the same time. So it was annexed into the city of Hayden, so that the right-of-way is, the city of Hayden's in this little, where's my mouse? This piece in blue here is kind of what we consider to be the knobs. When you drive up Lancaster, and we're used to go around the knob this way, now you kind of go around the knob that way. So it's just kind of a rock basalt thing up there. So then subsequent, when after the annexation and we were working with the folks that own the developer of the Marks property, we kind of recognized in the annexation that it would be kind of cool to utilize that as kind of an overlook or a park area kind of up there on the hill and get a really good view of the prairie. And at the same time, Avondale Irrigation District was looking at potential locations for a water storage tank. And the knob is a pretty good location for that to occur. So we kind of were both talking, all Lakes, Avondale, the city, we're all talking together about the possibility of park and water tank. So the 2040 Parks Master Plan, talk a lot about comp plans. Let's talk about part of the other Imagine Hayden documents. So the 2040 Parks Master Plan shows that neighborhood park would reside up there in that neck of the woods in the northeast quarter of the city. And it identified some anticipated costs for new park facilities as being a park that was somewhere between 5 and 10 acres, with land acquisition costs at about $80,000 an acre, and the development, the construction of that at about $125,000 an acre. So then Avondale kind of Irrigation District thought, well, wonder what our possibilities are. Think outside the box, water tank, park, think about options. So they worked with Del Hatch from Bernardo Wills Architecture, who kind of drew some concepts. Now these are concepts, that's the level, concept level, ideas. Think ideas. So if you're looking from an area, from above and you're flying over like a plane, you're looking straight down. This is that knob that we were talking about. And here's the water tank. It's about a 30 or 35 foot tall water tank, about the height of a 2-story house, plus or minus. It's a 1 million gallon water tank. It's about 75 feet in diameter. And they need to have that water tank online in 2022, which would be next year. So if you're on top of that 35 feet in the air, you have a great overlook of the prairie. And there are some really good, awesome educational opportunities as you're looking at the Rathdrum Prairie, potentially the Rathdrum Prairie aquifer. You're on top of a water tank, water. This particular drawing shows this kind of maybe being a BMX bike course back here. There's a pathway that kind of goes all the way around. These little things are like exercise stations. Possibility of some sports courts, some play areas, restrooms, and pavilions. So, and some fair amount of parking. Now, the park itself, the knob piece that we call itself, is really just this piece here. But to make this really work well with the parking and the sports court, this is like 3 lots in Marks Ranch subdivision. Flat parking area space that would enable us to utilize the rock better. So let's take that very flat 3-dimensional look. I have one more here, so let's see. Yeah. So let's take that very flat look and tip it up and look at what it looks like. I'm a drawing person. I like seeing 3Ds. And so if you take that water tank and you look at the 3D view, kind of the concept was to allow stairs up to the top of the water tank. And then on top of the water tank, and there's this kind of cantilever deck area, and the water tank lining up this wall kind of on the back with the mountains that are behind it. So it really is all about the geography of the area and how this area fits with the Rathdrum Prairie aquifer. In the last drawing, we talked about that BMX track as a possibility. And in this one, we're looking at an amphitheater area. It's just got a lot of choices. So stairs up, deck, wall. Slides are kind of an interesting thought. We're not sure that would work. And the rock wall, it has some, concerns about climbing up the side of it. But, pretty cool, awesome concepts. So kind of blowing that up a little bit, in order for Avondale to move their kind of structure forward, we kind of needed to figure out what it's going to take to put stairs attached to that concrete tower or concrete water tank, and what it was going to take to do that cantilever deck. The other thing is this has to function as a water tank. They need to get some doors or hatches into the tank, so they're kind of going to do that with that faux wall or that wall that's up above, potentially, something to that effect. Nisha's shaking her head. So page 8 of the 2040 Park Master Plan, because remember I like the whole book, not just the maps that are in both of them, talks about access to quality leisure opportunities in the form of developed parks and expanded recreation programs is expected and has become a valuable economic tool for vibrant and dynamic communities. Parks provide service to a broad spectrum of residents, and they reflect our values and culture, as well as providing a valuable link to the natural systems that directly influence our mental and physical health. So it's hoped that in addition to the plans that were that highlighted in the park plan, that as actions and tools emerge, Hayden will be a top choice for parks and rec endeavors in northern Idaho. And on page 40, talks about when you do a recreation assessment of all of the parks, most all of our parks fit in the physical recreation kind of category where they require intense physical effort or exertion. But as communities mature, they have parks that also address social recreation, cognitive recreation, and environmental related recreation. So educational opportunities can abound in parks. So funding, how do you fund this park? Well, the park plan identifies a variety of funding sources: the general fund, impact fees, grants, park dedications, donations, park foundations, conservation land trusts, the North Idaho Centennial Trail Foundation, and many service clubs. The park plan identifies that this park is assuming that the land is acquired through the annexation process, And then it identifies a $500,000 for the development of trails and the overlook, but it's in the midterm CIP, not the near term.
Just for clarification, we're not buying the land.
No,
Okay, that's, because we start there. This is not something that the city of Hayden is responsible for from a land standpoint, nor a tower standpoint.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
The annexation agreement required the dedication of land. Now, the land that was required as part of the annexation agreement identified this as kind of a specialty park. It was before, the annexation agreement came before the 2040 Parks Plan. And it identified that it wanted it to have hiking trails and a trailhead location. So most of the area that was proposed in the annexation agreement was really the hilly part of the property and not flat land. So what's kind of proposed for a trade of that land that was required in the annexation agreement is 3+1 around the stormwater area, and those are in construction plans that haven't been approved, but it's 3 acres-ish. And they're flat. They're kind of prime. They're right at the entrance of the subdivision. They aren't in the backyards of both the residents of Mark's Ranch and the neighbors to the west, but up on the main area of the Mark's subdivision. So that's kind of the land equivalent that staff was looking at. And then trying to figure out the developer's purport.
Sometimes just to make sure, because I get you,
Right.
good. So the proposal for the MOU that is that, and Bob can help on the other side too, and you can, is that for the park standpoint, which is what you're addressing, that they're going to give the city of Hayden lots?
Correct.
4 lots.
3+.
3+.
Yeah. Because we don't want the
Which was
stormwater
not-
retention
which-
area. We want them to
Which
keep
was
it.
more than was originally identified in the PUD.
Not a PUD, annexation agreement.
Annexation,
So the
thank you.
annexation agreement identified 5.385 acres of land, but estimated at least half of it was really hilly, and only about 3 acres of it was trailhead, still not completely flat. So this is relatively flat-ish, I'm looking at Rob, relatively flat-ish land that is far more usable for park infrastructure,
Given to the city.
given to the city as a requirement of their annexation agreement. So how do you come up with their proportionate share, whether it's dollars or it's them doing work within the new park? So like constructing the parking lot or putting in the sewer, the irrigation backbone or the, whatever. How do you establish what their proportionate share is? So assuming, again, those 3 of 5-ish acres was flattish land, parkland, and the remainder was natural hillside acres, and utilizing Appendix 3, thanks to Alan, he found it, Appendix 3 of the 2040 Parks Plan, and looking at what was required of amenities within that developed area of the annexation, within the annexation agreement, and using those unit costs, you end up with about $380,000 plus or minus that is their proportionate share of contribution toward the construction of the now neighborhood park that would be kind of a joint endeavor between Avondale's water tank and the city park.
Plus the land.
Yeah.
Yeah, on top of that.
Yeah, got the land. So then design. So, yeah, they had to design the park that they had to construct, but the park that they were required to construct isn't the park that we want kind of developed now. And so we want to move this from that conceptual cool drawings to a schematic concept, and then eventually to actually designing said park, once we figure out our amenities and our phasing and what have you. So that's why the MOU says that this design here is kind of estimated based on the dollar amount of what the construction costs are, but it may not be that dollar amount. So it is really 50% of the design of the park. That's what the MOU says. Maybe more than that. So the water storage tank, as I said, has to be online by 2022. That's a Department of Environmental Quality requirement. So
Why, maybe we can get, Bob, why is that? If in fact we're down the road to 2025 or 2026? And is that in your presentation, Bob, or are you answering questions, or?
I'll answer questions, sure.
Okay. You probably should do it in front, but I mean, that's one of them is, why do we have to have it online by 2022? For clarification. And you can stand next to Donna.
you have to come up here.
Because I hate to have you just be able to sit.
So Avondale Irrigation's, Mr. Mayor and council members, my name is Bob Chandler. I'm the district manager for Avondale Irrigation, and I have been for some time. And I was accompanied tonight by Nisha Miani, who is with Welch Comer, and she's most of the mastermind behind this. So just to kind of start at the beginning, and then I'll get to your question. When Lakes Highway District approved the deeding of the property to the city, it's going to come with a blanket easement for Avondale Irrigation. So we're going to have an easement on it before it's deeded to the city. I have 3 board members who are very community minded, and the last thing we wanted to do was to just, knowing that the city wanted to have a park there, the last thing we wanted to do was just cram a tank on the top of it and put a fence around it and say, there, build your park. So we really wanted to figure out a way to kind of make it, something kind of neat. Nisha and I went back and forth. We went to the board. We got a hold of Del Hatch, who is a genius, and he came up with, this concept. And our whole thing was, let's get people on top of it. Let's make it a center focal point of the park, and let's see if we can't make this something that nobody else has. And there's not a community anywhere even close to here that has anything like this. It could. And if you would have seen Dell's presentation, not that Donna's was bad, but he brought it out, as to turn this into an aquifer protection sort of a project. We're going to put the aquifer painted onto the top of it that shows all the lakes, from Pend Oreille to Coeur d'Alene to Twin to rock climbing on the side. But a lot of stuff that may or may not go. But the need for Avondale to have the tank is because our master plan says that we need the tank. DEQ wants us to have the tank. We've got a limited amount of connections that we can serve without the correct fire storage and, just peak hour demand storage. So we've been looking at places for a tank for a while. It was just kind of odd that we were looking at it at the same time as the city. It worked out really good for us because we don't have to have a super high tank.
And you're going to cover the cost of the tank?
We're going to build it, no.
Thank you.
So here's the deal. We could put a steel tank up on the site, which steel tanks kind of come pre-engineered with the exception to the site plan and the foundation. We could put a steel tank up for about probably 30 or 40% cheaper than we could build a concrete reservoir that will hold the load, of people up on top of it. But my board has said, we want to make this something that's really cool, and we will do that if the city of Hayden can get behind this and they want to take it to the next step. We will construct the reservoir out of concrete, and we will construct it in a manner that allows for all of the amenities that I guess was shown in the presentation. Cantilever deck, steps, all that has to be figured out later. But even just getting people on top of it, we're adding about 30% to the cost of what we could put a tank up there for. So what we're looking for tonight is we need to start designing a tank tomorrow to meet our goal of going out to bid in January and then getting this thing constructed next year. Not everything that's being proposed here has to be done. We just need to get a tank that holds water. And, all of the amenities in the park, and that can be a phase thing that the city of Hayden takes on and does later. And we gladly will work with you guys on, where we put the water lines down through the park. We've offered up a couple connections. We've paid for the initial, I think it's about $6,000 just to get Del Hatch to get the concept, just to kind of push this thing forward. So At this point, we have about $50,000 invested in just the geological study to make sure we could put a tank there, the design, the engineering. And we're just looking for something tonight from you guys, just saying, yeah, we'll go forward with the plan. And if you guys say no, we're fine with that, because we'll just put a steel tank there. But it does not fit the needs of your park nearly as well as it would as if we could do a joint project like this with a concrete reservoir.
So process-wise, Lakes Highway District owns the land.
Maybe
They would
pull the
then.
map up.
Excuse me?
I was going to ask Donna to pull up so you can point where you're talking about, because it does get confusing, the Lakes Highway District piece plus the lots that would be given where they're at.
And Brett, why don't you walk us through if you want?
Do you want that map or do you want the other
Bob.
map?
Okay,
You want that one?
don't know.
Well, the Lakes Highway District is that blue stuff, show that.
Yeah, go back to that one, yeah.
All right.
So the water tower is not, the city of Hayden is not part of that. It is Lakes and Avondale Water, correct?
Lakes Highway District is going to create a blanket easement on that entire property that says that Avondale can put a reservoir in the best place and all of their pipes and everything. Then they're going to deed it to the city.
No wonder Ron McIntyre likes you. Good answer. Okay, just for clarification. So deeded to the city.
That blue area is what Lakes Highway District owns, which would be deeded to the city.
Correct. No, it's just deeded to the city. I just want to make sure we follow the process, we follow the budget. So then the city does what in a legal sense to give you the land to build the, we don't give you any
They'll have the
land.
land.
Anything, because I have an easement.
That's okay.
They'll have the
Thank you.
easement.
Sorry for that.
Once the tank is built and all of the water lines and the appurtenances are in, meaning part of the water system, the city then refines the easement, and that becomes the easement we have. We don't have a lifelong blanket easement on the property, just until we get our stuff in, and then our easement becomes the tank, the lines, and probably some ingress, egress to do maintenance on the tank.
And you're willing, if the city's willing to, and I don't, we'll identify the city's commitment or desire, whether they want to or not, you're going to build a water tower, and you're willing to be able to expend additional dollars to be able to make that water tower something that, first of all, is better than not an eyesore, can I say that correctly? And that we could utilize then resources associated with partnering that with a park.
Exactly.
Okay.
You would have some design stuff on the tank as you go forward, like the steps. If you decide that you...
No slides, by the way.
Slides would be awesome. They have one like that in Spokane that's about the same height. Yeah, so I know it can be done. The cantilever part, if you guys decide, oh, we want to do the aquifer on top, we talked about making it an educational project. I think those are the types of projects that you drag a lot of people in. When you start talking aquifer protection, there are a lot of aquifer protection groups out there that love to throw money at this kind of stuff and get involved in it and help you design it. We were talking plaques, just talking about how the aquifer was formed, how we protect it, there's just so much that you could do with it. And Dell had mentioned making it a feature park. And I don't know if that's something the city of Hayden would ever want to do, but there are only certain feature parks around. People travel to them, feature park to feature park. But that would be something that the city of Hayden would have to decide on. But Avondale is willing to construct the reservoir out of concrete in a manner that will allow community citizens to get on top and enjoy the view.
Please thank your board for that forward thinking and partnership.
I will do
Because
that.
other water districts,
Careful.
this is the best relationship that I've ever had with the water district today or yesterday. So thank you. How did I do? Thank you for that.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Please, oh, please.
Is there any, if we put this all together, is there any
Nice way out of that.
timelines, expectations on the city on when it actually gets developed into a park?
There's no timelines by Avondale Irrigation. We have our own timelines for construction and, bidding it and getting it going. But as far as when the city, that's totally up to you guys, I
Okay,
guess.
great.
I think it seems like it's more between you guys and the developer than it is between you guys and us. We just want something that holds water.
Great, great.
Roger.
Thank you. And then I have a question of Donna. Donna, is there any way, I know you're working with the developer on some issues. If that falls through, is there any way that affects this?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm looking at Ellen too. I don't think so.
I think that the timeline that we have, because there's 3 things on the agenda, and I think I want to make, the next 3 items on the agenda all deal with this tank, and they all deal with timelines, and they're different for the different agreements. So there's an agreement with Avondale, there's agreement with the developer, there's an agreement with the designer. So our timeline is we need to get them the information they need to get their design done so they can meet their schedule. So we do have a time constraint on a portion of this, and that would be to decide what amenities we feel is appropriate on that tank structure so that their designer can get those elements designed into the core of the tank so that we can add those amenities later or at the same time, depending on what our timeline's at. So that is one time constraint we have. The other time constraint really is developing the park that can be done with potentially help from the developer and also maybe some other grants or some other things. So that's a separate timeline. And so we have, before you, you're going to have tonight, the next 3 items are one that Donna was talking to right now is an agreement between the developer, which is discussing the financial obligations from that developer on this park per that agreement for his portion of that. Then we have an agreement coming forward so that we can hire Del Hatch and his team to help us decide which will have what amenities we think is appropriate, with some concepts have already been brought up. Now, we haven't picked any of those for hard space yet or anything, but we need to make that decision so that if they affect the tank design that they're doing, they can meet their schedule, which is a fairly tight timeline. And that is the third deal, is the MOU between us and them that defines who's responsible, what parts of those amenities, and who's responsible for the maintenance of those amenities should they become reality.
And the Bernardo Wills piece, the last piece, it does have an open house component, so we will be including members of the public as far as an open house, as far as what those amenities will be as well. So.
And the 15,000 for C, for the agreement, the MOU for R&K development, the 15,000 comes under impact fees?
Yeah, we have a budgeted 20,000 under impact fees.
So that money's
for
already, so
Mark's
the city's
park
not,
design.
it's not coming out of general funds? Okay.
And I wanted to also point out that the annexation requirements for the park for the developer are annexation requirements. His subdivision requirements of every residence that gets built in there, they will pay park impact fees. They don't get credits for this park.
Good.
Yeah, the park requirements were just part of the annexation agreement.
I have a few questions, Mayor.
Sure, please.
First question is the primary supply of this water will go to Hayden Canyon?
Not necessarily, no. Whether Hayden Canyon was going in or not, we would need this tank. With the current developments that we have on our board right now, we have about 1,000 lots coming on in developments that have been proposed to the city and to us. That's counting only 2 of the sub phases of Hayden Canyon. So most of our growth is out on the prairie. Currently, as we put new wells in, they're going out on the prairie, and we're trying to push water all the way to Strayhorn to our tank, so it bottlenecks us. We need another location for a tank, so that if we add a well out on the prairie right now, it increases the pressures out there by like 15 PSI. We need a tank that's closer, so we're not trying to push water all the way across town, so that we can, just even out our system.
And those are commercial and residential
Right.
connections, correct?
The tank will and the tank will somewhat, it'll feed water, I guess, help feed water to the lower part of Hayden Canyon. But the most of Hayden Canyon is going to have its own tower. They're building a reservoir up on top. That's going to be just for them, and it'll also help the R&K, because it seems weird we're putting this tank right by Ron Rosenberger's, but it's not at all connected into him. Water to get to the R&K would have to go all the way down and around and come up through a booster station. Water that's being pumped up to his is not going into the reservoir. This reservoir simply meets the datum of our existing reservoir.
Yeah, another question, you stated that a metal tank is about a 30 to 40% less than a concrete tank.
Yes, sir.
Who's picking up the difference in that cost? Are you paying for the concrete tank, that additional amount, or is the city?
That's what Avondale Irrigation has offered to do. We have offered to pay that additional, we have offered to pay an extra 30 to 40% and build the concrete reservoir so that the city can use it as a focal point for the park.
Okay, and then what do you anticipate, I know it's giving you some specifics, but it's a concern I have. What do you see as the capacity of people on top of the tank? I mean, could you have a bunch of classrooms go up there and it can hold like 100 people or 50 people?
I would think so, yes. Anisha?
Yeah, that is getting pretty specific. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but yeah, that was the intent, is that it could be used for education. I don't know if that's 100 or if it's, 50 people.
So regardless, you'll design and build whatever is required structurally to handle whatever maximum amount of people go up there.
That's what yeah.
Okay, and then one last thing, and it's just, I know what kids are like, because I used to be one a long, long time ago, and climbing up on this thing would be just so much fun. My concern is, just from the steps and the height and that, is how is that going to be managed so that some kid doesn't jump off or fall off? I mean, you look at our playground out here, and we have special wood chips that come from Utah because they have to be a certain type. So when kids do fall, who's going to manage that, and who's liable if someone falls off of that?
That's probably a question more for the city, and that's part of the design element, that if we decide that that is an element we want in the park, which has not been decided yet, that would be a design requirement as a part of that element to address those safety concerns and how that would get accomplished. And
the liability issues, we had some discussions in that regard. I mean, I had concerns, we would want to design so that we could lock it and have maybe hours, so that people aren't going up there all hours of the night and things like that. So those are details that we've been thinking about, but need to work through as we move forward with this design.
And Avondale has requested to the city that we don't want the liability. We want to make it so that you guys can be up there, but it's the park. I mean, if you guys want to be on top of it, we'll build it that way, but we don't want the liability of what you guys are going to do with it on top there. We're going to pretty much turn this over to the city. If they want to have weddings up there, if they want to do this, if they want to do that, we're fine with it. But to us, it's just a water tank.
We usually have weddings at Harbs, so this would be,
So that will be something we need to work through.
but that will be in partnership as it's being built.
It is, part of this is, and I had a discussion with their council yesterday that was kind of like, at the end, it's almost like, well, this is really an agreement to keep agreeing, because we don't know the design yet. We have ideas, we have some sketches, and we have things that we think would be really cool, but then it comes down to
cost and
liability, and us thinking about, well, that does sound awesome, but who's going to take care of it? Is somebody in Alan's crew going to get out there right away? I agree with you on children and just people in general. Accidents happen. So we need to think about those things going through the design. I think there's a lot of options for us, and Avondale is certainly wanting to work with us on that design and what we would want. to the extent we just can't get behind some of those design elements or they're cost prohibitive, we don't have to
I
add
can see
it.
this is the most critical question, which way you're going to go. Metal tank's going to save you a lot of money, and you need to know which way we're going to go right away, because you're not going to build a concrete tank if we're not going to be able to.
That is really our only fear.
Right.
Is that, you know, you guys would say, yeah, we want to go through with it. We would push forward with the design even on the concrete tank will cost us so much more than just a steel tank because they're pre-engineered. That we would push forward with it, start construction, and then you guys would decide, yeah, we can't do the liability thing, or we just don't want to have to deal with the steps or anything. And then we've got a concrete reservoir or a bomb shelter sitting up there that we paid for that, you know, we could have put that money elsewhere into another well or something.
From my understanding though, Bob, and that's the right answer, but that they're willing to risk that if in fact we approve the MOU, meaning we're not committing, but we're saying, okay, we like the idea, and they're the ones that then will assume that risk.
So when's the drop dead deadline to know which way to go then, metal or concrete?
So, I mean, really, I guess, and this is going to have to kind of go back to Avondale, but we would, because the time frame is so short,
Right.
if you all want to proceed, we would likely proceed as if we're going concrete. We would absolutely need to know if you want to move forward before we go and bid the project. But there may be some additional costs, as Bob said, with the tank concrete structure design that Avondale incurs, but may have to, you know, I guess, agree to just cover that cost until we know that you do want to move forward. I guess what I'm saying is Avondale may be going at risk on the concrete structure design until about the time that we bid the project.
So when's the drop dead deadline is my
January.
question.
So
When do we need to tell you?
January.
Yeah, and if you,
January, okay.
if you guys sign the MOU and a month down the road, you just can't make this come together, you can't get over the liability thing, or you just think this is just not cost prohibitive, you know, then you just let us know and we immediately stop design on our tank and we will proceed with a steel tank.
So it sounded like there was a little, you were asking about a drop dead date. And in our meetings, we were thinking end of October, which means that kind of our preliminary design, preliminary estimates for what we kind of think could be included on this tank, we have to get that design going and get those concepts kind of laid out, get some preliminary numbers for costs, have an open house, and discuss with the public.
No, we talked about not having the open house until after. We were really focusing in on the accessibility to the top of the tank. So the stairs and the cantilever deck and the.
But the drop dead date is not January 1.
Right, it's more like the
actually
end of
like
October.
end of October.
Well, I just want to thank you
Because they need to do the design.
and your board for your consideration and willingness. As the mayor mentioned, not all water districts are willing to.
I do have a great board and I will pass that on, thank you. And you know.
Except your chair,
Yeah.
he's shaky.
Yeah.
You know, and if you guys, the only reason we would be building this out of concrete is to get on top of it. That's the only reason.
Thank you.
So if we're not going to be on top of it, we don't have to have concrete.
So one last question, if we don't have people going on top of it, are there any amenities we can do to a metal tank that would make it pretty cool?
Yeah, picture paint.
Paint it.
I
There's
know.
not much you can do to, there's not much you can do to a steel tank because they're just.
Really cool paint with really cool pictures.
Mr. Mayor, I have a
Please.
question for Brett.
Yes.
Have you checked with iCrimp at all?
As far as
About this?
liability, I mean, one interesting thing, we both have ICREP as far as liability. I think we wanted to get some more concepts of what we would be looking at before we go and talk with them. But we have a lot of protections when you're talking about parks and park amenities, so.
Yeah, and we do. We would, I mean, is it something that would be covered? We'll have insurance? Absolutely. I mean, I think Councilmember Roder brings up a great point, though. We can't control what the public's going to do all the time, you know. I took my son to the park right out here this summer, and there was an older kid just walking totally upright on top of your swing set. Like, what? I mean, like a metal bar, like this thick. And I was like, don't do that. You're going to show Garrett to do that. And then I'm going to, that's a problem for all of us. But, so I agree with that. But to the extent of like, is there insurance? Would we have coverage? Yes. Are there signs that we can put up that this is how you should use park equipment? You don't climb on top of, you don't walk on top of swing sets, you know, things like that. But I think that's something, if we go forward, we will have to keep those concerns in mind on the design phase, because that will really impact the design.
I mean, we have, even your bridges nowadays
Yeah.
have special defenses around them. I mean, there's things that we can do, but we have to have all that stuff in place. We're trying to set the ground rules right now. The memorandum agreement between them is really setting the ground rules, who's responsible for what if we move forward, is what it's really bringing up. And then the other memorandum is with the developer that's saying, this is what your financial responsibility is with the park. And then the third element here is the agreement, so that we can get started on trying to figure out what these amenities are and what they cost and see what makes sense for the city.
So money's already budgeted to be able to do that. Any more questions? We're going to take this one at a time. It will be it's supposed to be A1 with two I's. Really? So AI, and the next one is 6AII. Is that how we want to designate it? So this first motion will be for 6AI, approval of professional services agreement with Del Hatch, Bernardo Willis Architects, PC. Do we have a motion to approve the professional services agreement?
Yes.
And do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember DeLange?
Yes.
Councilmember Roder?
Yes.
Council President Satterfield?
Yes.
And Councilmember Panabaker?
Yes.
Thank you. The next motion will be for 6AII, Memorandum of Understanding with Avondale Irrigation District. Do we have a motion to approve the Memorandum of Understanding as it's been presented?
So, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember Panabaker?
Yes.
Council President Satterfield?
Yes.
Councilmember DeLange?
Yes.
And Councilmember Roder?
Yes.
Thank you. 6AII, action item, Memorandum of Understanding with R&K Development LLC, of which it's also been included. Do we have a motion to approve the Memorandum of Understanding with R&K Development LLC?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember Roder?
Yes.
Councilmember Panabaker?
Yes.
Council President Satterfield?
Yes.
And Councilmember DeLange?
Yes.
Thank you. All. City Administrator reports.
Couple items real quick. Just a heads up, so next month is October, it's Halloween, and we are putting together plans for the drive-through trunk or treat, and we're moving it over to Hayden Meadows this year. And
Hayden Meadows, no?
Yeah. So Susie.
That's why I asked the question. You might want to validate that.
Okay.
Donna, you're not presenting this part?
I think note to self, wear tennis shoes next time.
It's had a long time for that. Anyways, the plan is to do it, whether it's there or back here, October 29th, 5 to 6:30.
Dutch Brothers would rather we do it out here so that they get a lot of people going in for coffee while they're waiting in the line.
Let's see, next, we're finalizing the newsletter. Abby and staff have been working on that for a while. We're hoping that we'll finalize the wording like tomorrow or the next day and get it to the printer. We do have some information in there about trying to update on where we're at on the comp plan and giving some information about our impact fees and fees, questions that we've heard from folks. And so we're hoping that will be just informational and helpful. Impact fees. I mentioned this, we've been working on the impact fees, and I know Councilman Roders mentioned multiple things. I just want to give you a heads up that we've got a kind of a rough draft back from FCS, and the numbers are higher, but they're not a lot higher. And so we're looking to take it to the group in October sometime to have them look at it. But when we got the numbers back, it was, I don't know, for me, it was a little bit surprising. And so before that we start to look at it and see the reasons why and what projects are on there, I just wanted to give the council a heads up for the very reason, because I know we'll be looking at this. We haven't decided anything, but it just was a little different than what I had expected. And so that's more just of here's a heads up tonight as we move forward. And if you have questions and want to come in and look at it or talk, we can do that. Our website is being updated. I thought it just multiple staff members were looking at it. We're going to, hopefully we'll have a fresh look to it. We're going to be adding some different things. Michael's been heading that up, and Abby's been doing a lot of work. We have a couple staff members on that. And so we actually are getting this, I think, mostly free based on our contract with them. It was time to refresh and update it. So if you have any thoughts or comments on the website, you can provide them to Abby, but staff's continuing to look at that. Also, I was going to mention, so next week I will be gone Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for my annual conference, ICMA conference. Just so you're aware, and I'll give you a report on that when I get back. And then also the Read Dakota, I think all of you got email about one of our citizens that was concerned. I guess he was T-boned. And so Alan, our staff, they went out there and did some work on that intersection. I think they took out a truckload of material to make the sight distance, trailer full.
Truck and trailer full.
To make the sight distance area look better. We've also talked about maybe one of those signs, Alan's going to look at it, where it says cross traffic does not stop. I've seen those in a couple locations, and so that
With the flags.
that's the action that we're looking at. So they did that work on Friday. Alan's looking at getting some of those signs, and then we can, when we get those signs, we can send an email to the citizen that was concerned with that.
When you brought that up, just real quickly too, I've had feedback. If you're going north on Miles at Lacey, there's a stop sign. I know you have to get there, so you're north on Maple. Sorry, on Maple, past Miles to Lacey. Thank you all. And I have comfortable chairs to sit in. As people are looking to the west, there are hedges there that are getting in the way. And I know they pruned a little bit, but I've had more people this week if they can.
The challenge we got, Mayor, is we have very narrow right-of-ways. We don't own that property.
I know, but let them know, because that's been and I tell people that, Alan.
I don't know what, short of
No,
getting
we've brought it up. I shared it with you in the meeting, and you are aware, and you're doing everything that you can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been a problem for years.
It has. It has. And they did trim them. I just wanted to give you an update.
We try to trim them as much as we can also.
To the extent they're in our right.
And last, just a reminder, our new budget year starts Friday. So we're finalizing that. Sandy's online, I think. And she did print off, if you got it up, those that requested, we have a printed copy of the budget if you need that as well. Those that responded to her, I think she has one for you. So Friday, a new budget year.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes.
Brett, there was one more about the meetings in November and December. There was, staff wanted to know if we were going to hold the November 23rd city council meeting.
Oh, no. The one by Thanksgiving, yeah.
And then December 21st is the Tuesday before.
Is it easier for you if we identify now? Because that's always been on our schedule.
Noticing for hearings.
So
November 23rd.
November 23rd is 2 days before Thanksgiving, and November 21st is 4 days before Christmas. And no, it's the 28th in December.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's after. Can we just propose for November 23rd and then wait a little bit till after Christmas.
So you
In
would
case
like
stuff
to
needs, or do you
cancel
need-
the-
No.
When, for noticing deadlines, when would staff need to know for the December meeting?
If you wait until the first meeting in December to cancel the second meeting in December, that screws up
It's
noticing.
too.
No, that's what I mean. So when do you need, but we're only,
First meeting in November?
November.
First reading in November.
You'll need to know by
if
November
there's-
9th.
It's the 9th.
is there an issue then, council, with not having a meeting on the 28th of December and the 23rd of November? And if we need to, we can meet January 4th if there's things that need to be done, Donna, if we need to have a special meeting for something going forward, but I think it would be good then to identify now
We could also do a special meeting in November or December.
if we need to. Are we okay with that, Jerry, Roger? Okay. Then,
good.
then there will be no meeting scheduled for December 28th, 2021, or November 23rd, 2021. And the fact that we're already there is
Sad.
depressing,
Yes.
because I'm not a skier. Anything else from members of the council?
I just have one thing to share. What I'm hearing, and it's from a good source, my wife, is that we will see a federal government shutdown because continuing funding is not going to happen. And so she's saying that the employees have already been noticed that they're not going to work. Unfortunately, my wife has to work because she does all the...
Sorry, not a COVID shutdown, a debt.
The
a COVID?
continuing funding problem.
That's what I mean. I thought you said COVID, and I thought, no, it's the funding.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's funny. It's good. She says for sure. My wife's got to work though because she does all the military academy nominations for the whole state, and you can't stop that, so she'll be having to work for free.
For free, yeah. Courtesy of the federal government.
But she loves that part of her.
TSA will be working for
So anyway, just however that may affect the city, I want to bring that up.
Thanks for,
Thank you.
I hope.
I'm sad to hear that, Matt, but I trust Karen. The one thing I wanted to share is that the presentation that was done, Karen Roeder was there as well for the unknown soldier, and a plaque was put in by the Coal Traps. Sandy led it, and we're grateful for their donation to the city of Hayden and to the city of Coeur d'Alene, so that was really cool. So, anything else? Hearing none, do I have a motion? Yep.
You reminded me, with Susie not here, and she is home, by the way, Veterans Day celebration we're planning on doing out here on the 11th. At 11 a.m. And so we'll have some...
11 at 11 a.m.
Normally, we won't come in here, but we'll plan on doing it out there.
Cool. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.
No, I think that turned off, don't